This is a walkthrough of how to use AI to help create a 5 or 6 generation family tree in Microsoft Excel that will print on a single landscape page. Those dotted lines there show the print area. Hit File, Print, and you can see that this fits on a single page. Would you like a color scheme that distinguishes between male and female ancestors? Here we go. You choose your own colors. 5 generation, 6 generation. We've got an older video that does this by painstakingly placing the boxes for names and dates and those fiddly connector lines. That was before ChatGPT and the other AI tools arrived on the scene. So I figured I'd do this again, but use AI to make the process much easier and much faster to complete. Unfortunately, you can't tell the AI to spit out a spreadsheet for you, but what you can do is prompt it to create Excel macros that do most of the work. Don't worry if you haven't created an Excel macro before. If you've used a formula to sum up numbers, you can copy and run the macros that the AI tool will give you. I'll show you exactly how. So we'll do things in this order. We'll figure out where to place these boxes, then we'll add the connector lines, then we'll sort out the column widths and row heights to fit on the single landscape page. I'm going to start with this single color here, which might suit you, and then I'll show you how to go a little further and set different colors, and you'll also see how easy it is to choose your own preferred font and formatting for the name and date details. Okay, let's get started. I go to ChatGPT. chatopenai.com. I've got a new session and I'm going to do something you don't need to do. I am going to set this to a temporary chat. By doing so, ChatGPT won't remember our previous conversations. And I've done this exercise several times, but I don't want chat to learn from what I've done before. I want you to see what it looks like when you're doing it fresh. I'm also on the free version. You've seen the final spreadsheet, but you're starting with blank spreadsheet and you need to figure out where to position the boxes. There's no need for trial and error. Just let the AI tool figure it out when you give it the pattern. We'll start with the 5 generation pattern and then we'll do the 6 generation. So the 5th generation is 8 ancestors, each taking up 2 rows. That's 32 rows in total. The home person, which may be you, should be halfway down this column. In other words, it should be at the midpoint. Let's get ChatGPT to figure out where that position is. Here's my first prompt. I have 32 rows in an Excel spreadsheet. What cell marks the midpoint of column B? If the midpoint falls between 2 cells, pick the first cell. Submit that. So it's telling me B16. And that is correct. The midpoint is between 16 and 17 with 32 rows, and I asked it to pick the first cell, which is B16. Now, you're probably thinking you could have figured that one out yourself, and sure, but it gets trickier with calculating the subsequent generations. This is where the AI comes into its own. Let's have a think about the general pattern of how entries are positioned at each generation. In general, if we look at the 2nd generation in column E, the 2 entries are at the midpoint of half the column, halfway down the column. So let's say that's the first half section, that's at the midpoint, and that's the second half section, and that's at the midpoint. Then if we go up to the next generation, this is the first of 4 sections, and the entry we want is at the midpoint. That is the second of 4 sections, third of 4 sections, and the fourth of 4 sections, with this entry being at the midpoint of its own section. And that also holds true for column K. And that's the pattern that we'll explain to ChatGPT. Back into ChatGPT, and my second prompt is for the 2nd generation, which is in column E. I want to divide column E into 2 sections. What are the 2 cells that mark the midpoints of each section? Submit that. It'll work out the calculations in detail. And there is the final answer. 3rd generation is column H, which will have 4 ancestors. I want to divide column H into 4 sections. What are the 4 cells that mark the midpoints of each section? And here's the final answer. Column K has 8 ancestors. I want to divide column K into 8 sections. What are the 8 cells that mark the midpoints of each section? A bit more to calculate here, and here is the final answer. The fifth generation can be phrased a little differently. Basically, the name is in every second row here, row 1, row 3, row 5. It is the oddly numbered rows going up to row 32. That's what I'll tell ChatGPT. List every odd numbered cell in column N ending at row 32. Submit that. And there we have the fifth generation. I'm now going to ask ChatGPT to give me a full list of all the cells that it's worked out. I'm doing that for several reasons. One, as you keep going, it can forget later in the chat some of the cells. And two, because I'm on the free plan, if it gives up the ghost, I won't need to start again later with the prompts I've already run. I'll have the list, and I can also move to a different AI with this list and keep going. So here's my prompt. Give me a comma delimited list of the identified cells in columns B, E, H, K, and N. And here we go. Exactly what I want. You're probably chomping at the bit to do some work in Excel, right? So let's get to it. I'm going to open up a new Excel workbook. And we are going to ask ChatGPT to create macros that will position and format the boxes as we want, but we need to figure out what formatting we want first. So let's do that in Excel with one of these name date boxes. And we'll do it with the home person, which if you remember, we said is going to be at position B16 for the name and B17. I like to put the date, birth year hyphen death year. For now, I'm going to set the width of column B to 17. I'm going to put in a reasonably long name so we can see what we're looking at. I'll say Annabelle Postlethwaite. And you immediately see that that spills over into the next cell. We'll deal with that in a minute. But for now, I want to change the font to maximize the amount of name that I can fit into a single cell. The default font here is reasonable, but I prefer to use a narrower font. I prefer to use band shrift condensed. So if I go up here to the font and I'll just type in BAHN, you'll see at the bottom here, band shrift has appeared. Now there's a few different fonts. The one that I like for the name is this band shrift condensed. And then I like to up the font size to 12 for the name. And this prints out pretty well, and you can see that a long name fits completely into the cell. Then in terms of the color, for the first version of this template, I'm going to use the same color for all the name boxes. And the color I like is a light green. It shows up nicely when printing, so I will go to color. And it's not quite this one, which is still a little bit too dark for me. But if you choose this one and then go back in and go down here to more colors, I'm going to edge up this little arrow upwards. You can see where it's telling me, well, this is what you got now, and this is what it will be if you choose where it's at here with this hex setting. And this works for me. You may choose a completely different color here. The key is to copy this. So I'm going to Control C and copy that hex. I'm going to click OK. And I'm just going to put that as a note. Control V as to what I chose. Underneath the name, I like to have the date. Birth year, I'll choose 1901 hyphen, I'll say 1999. I like it centered, like that. And then in terms of the font and size, I like a slightly lighter font for the date. So I still want band shrift, but this time I'm going to choose band shrift light condensed, and I am going to leave the font size at 11. In terms of the color, I like it as a light gray. So I'll go up to the coloring. I'll choose this color for now, but it's still a little bit darker than what I want. So I'll choose that, then go back in, go down here to more colors, and I'm just going to edge this up a little bit. And then I'm just going to take this, copy it, hit OK, and that's the hex for that color. If you're wondering why I'm copying it, I'm going to give the details to ChatGPT. So I also want a border, and I want a border around both cells. I'm going to highlight the two cells, and I'm going to have a border around those two cells. I don't want the thick outside border. You may want it. I'm going to take the thin outside border here. And now you can see that this is pretty much where I'm landing at. There is one more thing that I want to show you. And that is, well, what if you have a longer name? What if Annabelle Postlethwaite is actually Annabelle Postlethwaite Higginbotham? Well, the name spills over into the next cell area, and that doesn't look great. We want it to be truncated. There's several ways of doing that. I find the easiest way is in the adjacent cell. I'm just putting in a space and tabbing out, and you see that I get the truncation. Now, I'm not going to need that for the date in the way that I like it, but you may like to have location details, address details in here, country, state, as well as the date, and you may find longer addresses spill out, so I'll just stick a space in there for safety's sake. So having worked out these details, we're now going to tell ChatGPT to give us a macro that puts two cells formatted exactly like this with these helper cells alongside it in all the positions that we've calculated. Back to ChatGPT, and I'm going to get it to create the first macro. I want an Excel VBA macro named format name boxes. The macro operates on, and now I'm going to copy this list down to here, give myself a new line, and now I have to tell it what it's going to do. Now this is only the name cell, it's not the date cell. I'm going to tell ChatGPT that the macro needs to apply this formatting. And nothing is going to be new here, it's what we've already worked out. Set the font to band schrift condensed. Set the font size to 12. Set the background color to, now I'm not going to remember the hex, so I'm going to swivel back over to where I made a note of the hex for the name. That's this value. Because I copied over from Excel, it thinks I want the cell as an upload. I don't. I'll just X that up there, and I just want the value there. Then I want a new line. Now I'm going to do the border. So I want to have a top border, a left border, a right border, but I don't want a bottom border because there isn't border between the name and the date. So just top, left, and right. So I'm going to ask it to put in a sample value. I will get rid of these later, but it's kind of useful to have a name actually in there so you can kind of see the effect. For each of the target cells, enter the value, and I'm not going to use Annabelle. I'm going to use a name that applies to both men and women. I'll use Valerie Postlethwaite. And then this is important. You may not decide that you don't want to have a value. You can skip that, but you do need this piece. Enter a space into the adjacent cell to the right. And that is it. Now, there's a fair bit of instructions there. And at this point, I'm going to tell you that I also have the prompts in a PDF for download. You can find a link in the description below. But for now, I am going to submit this. And here it's giving me a macro. Right, so it's given us a VBA macro named format name boxes. It's got the list of the target cells that we specified. For every cell in that list, it's doing what we asked. It's setting the font name and size, the color, and then it's applying the borders. It's putting in this sample value, and then this important piece, it's sticking in an empty space to the right of the cell it's working on. I want to take this macro and I want to add it to my Excel workbook. So that's the next step. Before we open up the code editor in Excel, if you haven't already saved the spreadsheet you're working with, it'll make life easier if you do so. We want to save it as a spreadsheet with an extension that allows for macros. The standard Excel extension of XLSX does not allow macros. We're going to use the XLSM, M for macro extension. I'm going to click File, Save As. I'm going to go to where I want to save it, into this folder, where I already have a spreadsheet, but it's got the XLSX extension. That won't work. So what I'll call this is tree template, and I'm going to click the save as type to get more options. And you can see right below the XLSX option is the macro enabled workbook. So I choose that, and it changes the extension to XLSM, and I click save. The next step is to open the VBA code editor in Excel. There is a function key that will open the code editor. I can never remember what the function key is. You can ask ChatGPT if you like, but I want to get to it via the menu. Now, by default, it's not in the standard menu. If you don't see a developer tab along here, then you need to enable that tab in the menu. So go to File, Options, and here under Customize Ribbon, just scroll down and you'll see Developer. At the moment, it's not clicked. I'll click it on, hit OK, and suddenly this Developer option appears up here. So I'm going to click on Developer, and now I have these two icons over here is what we'll be using. This one, Visual Basic, there's the function key, it's Alt plus F11 that opens the code editor. So I'm going to click on that, and comes an empty code editor because right now I don't have any macros here. I want to copy and paste the VBA macro that ChatGPT has produced for me. I need somewhere to paste it into. I need a module. I'm going to go to here to the Insert menu. I'm going to choose Module. You just have to do this once. And that now pops open this white window here, which is the code editor where we can paste our code into. And this is Module 1. You could rename that, but there's no need. So now I've got this open. I'm going to toggle back into ChatGPT, and I am going to copy this VBA macro. I'm just going to use this copy button here, which will take the entire code that's copied into my clipboard, toggle back over to the code editor, and I'm going to Control V, and that pastes in the code. I'll just save here, and I can use the tab to go back to the worksheet, or you can close this. Here I am back in the worksheet. Now this is the one that I used for testing the formatting. Still want to keep a hold of these notes, but I'll just move them from where they are to get them out of the way. I'll stick them up here into A1, A2. Nothing is going in there. And now I want to run the macro. Could clear out this, but it should be overwritten by the macro. Let's see what happens. To run the macro, still in the developer tab, this time I go to the macros button here, or Alt F8. Click on that. Pops a box with a list of all the macros available to me. I just have the one, format name boxes, and I click on run. And as you can see, the original box, you can see the name has changed. It was Annabelle, it's changed to Valerie. And then I have these other names, cells, formatted in green. The widths aren't quite right. We'll look after the widths later. The next step is to do the date cell. And if you're wondering why we didn't do the names and dates together, I find that ChatGPT and some other AIs, if you give them too much code to do all at once, gets it wrong. It's better to do it in smaller steps. Back to the AI, and I'm going to ask it for a macro to set the date cells. And it's going to be quite similar to the name cells. So I'm just going to copy down this prompt, and I'll edit it before I submit it. So copy that to here. And what's different? So I want an Excel VBA macro named, in this case, it'll be format date boxes. The macro isn't operating on these specific cells. It's operating on the cell below these cells. In terms of the formatting, I want the font to be Bandschrift light condensed. I want the font size to be 11. The background color, I'll just go and find it in my notes. I kind of stuck it up here. Was the background color to the name. This was the background color for the date. So I'll copy this. I'll actually just, instead of copying the cell, I'll just copy the value here, and I'll overwrite this. I want to change the borders. So I don't want a top border. I want a bottom border and a left and right border. And then one last thing, I want to center the text for the date. Set the text alignment to center. So then for each of the target cells, I don't want this sample name here. I'll have a sample date of birth year 1901, death year 1999, and then I still want to enter the space into the adjacent cell to the right. And that's it. I'll submit this. Pretty similar, small number of differences. There's the center alignment. So I will copy this, copies the entire code here. toggle back over to Excel, I want to get back at the Visual Basic editor. And the reason why that's grayed out is that I do have it open. So I'll just hold on Alt and just tab to it. There we go. And that is my first macro there. I've got in the clipboard, I've got the code for the second macro. In here, in the code editor, beneath this first code section, just put my cursor here, hit Control V, and that gives me a second subroutine here or macro, and you can see that the code editor itself has put this line between the two. I'll hit save on that. I'll just close out of this, and now I go up to the macros icon here, click that, and see now I have two macros available to me. That was the first one, and this is the second one, format date boxes. I'm going to hit run, and there you can see that the date has gone in under the name, and we now have this complete border around the two cells. That's it for the name and date cells going into the right place. The next thing to do is the connector lines, the lines that make this look like a family tree. So let's have a quick think about these connector lines. We know that each generation that has a generation above has a line coming out here, the bottom of the fork, so to speak. Then there's a vertical line coming down here. Each generation that has a generation below has the tine of the fork. So it has a line coming to the left here. So those are probably the simplest lines to describe to ChatGPT to give us a macro. Let's go ahead and do it. I call this one set horizontal lines. So I'm operating on, let me just go up and find the list. Here we go. Just give it the list and then I'll modify the list. For these cells, I'm going to focus on getting the line going up, the line that should be here, here, here. By the way, I'm talking about a horizontal line, but I'm not going to use the line object in Excel. It's really finicky to place it. I'm simply going to use a bottom border on the cell to the right. In a 5-generation tree, there won't be a line going up at the last generation. So I'm going to take the N cells out. We will deal with a 6-generation tree later. But for now, I'll take these N cells out. For these cells, add a bottom border to the cell to the right. Now, once I get that line going up, for each of the generations from 2 up to 5, I want a line going down or extending to the left. And again, I'll just use the bottom border. So for these cells, and I'll copy again the full list. Here we go. Again, this has generations 1 to 5, but this time, if I want a line going down, I don't want it for the first generation. It has no children. So I'll take out B16. That means it starts at the second generation. And for these, add a bottom border to the cell to the left. I'll submit that. So it's working out what the adjacent cell is. So I'll copy this back over to Excel, open the Visual Basic, down to the bottom here, give myself an extra line, hit Control V, in goes this new subroutine. Hit save on that, get out of here. And now, if I go to macros, I now have this new third macro, set horizontal lines, I hit run, and yeah, this is what I want. I'm just going to take away these notes, they don't need to be here anymore, and I want to put in the vertical lines. I'm not going to do that with a macro. It's just as fast to do this one manually. We do it with a left border, just highlight these cells, choose left border. You see, once you've got the horizontal lines, it's really very simple. Just highlight section, left border, border. There's a bit more now. Boom, 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 and boom. And then for this final generation, this is a little tedious. I'll show you a shortcut. Do one set, which is just the two cells. Highlight that. Then Control C to copy those two cells. Come down to the next position where it should be and Control V. And now you've got two done. Copy the two together. Control C down to the next section, and in we go. And now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 done. I'll copy those 4 down to where the next lot will go, and that's it. Yep, that is the tree. So let's sort out the widths so that this does print on a landscape page. How do I know that it doesn't already? Go up to File, Print, and set the portrait orientation to landscape. Now I go back, and what I'll get here is these dotted lines that show the print area. Notice that the row height is nearly there. We're just a little bit past, we're 2 cells past in order to fit on landscape. The standard row height is 15. I'm going to highlight all the rows from 1 to 32. Right click in the row area, go to row height, and I'm going to just reduce it down by 1 from 15 down to 14. There we go. And you can see now that it's within the dotted line, but it's not too cramped. The next thing I want to do is these name cells are too cramped. I want to give them more space. I like a width of 17 for the boxes. I've already set column B to 17. I'm going to set multiple columns at the same time by holding down the control key, clicking on the top of the column, E, H, K, and N. Then right-click any of the header boxes here. Go to column width. The standard, as you can see, is 8.09. I am going to increase that to 17. And you'll see that immediately we go well over the landscape orientation. Let's work from left to right. First of all, column A here, you may be wondering why I even have it, why I don't delete it. I just find that if I don't have it, if that name box is flush in column A, sometimes the left border here doesn't print correctly. That's why I like to have a placeholder first column here. I am going to set the column width to 1. Then these columns here with the connector lines, they're way too wide. Going to hold down Control key, pick C, D, F, G, I, J, L, M. That's all the connector lines. And I'm going to pick O, which has the space that stops a long name from spilling over. And I am going to right click now, any of these columns, come up with the column width, and I am going to set that to 3. Come out of here, scroll over to the left, and now you can see that dotted line within it and dotted line within it. This will print on a landscape page. And just to show, go up to File, Print, Landscape Orientation, and this is what it prints out as. And this is a nice printout you can take to the library. Now for the 6th and final generation for this video. This generation is going to look different to the others. I can't have a name and date box top and bottom for the 6th generation because that would mean I'd need 64 rows. I could have the row height to squeeze onto a single landscape page, but no, it just would look terrible, very difficult to read. So I'm going to make it look a little different. I'm going to show you a pair of ancestors before we go to our macro. If I copy this name box here, and then I copy it a second time below, then I take the date, I put the date here, and the date there, just increase that width to 17, and then I put in a connector line. I just put a bottom border on this top cell here. There you have father, mother with date, and that's what it's going to look like all the way down. That lets me fit 32 ancestors in the 6th generation. And you're thinking, well, yeah, okay, but that's clearly to the right of the print area. We'll take care of that after we've created a macro to put the 6th generation boxes in place. Back into ChatGPT, and one thing you may notice is that this is a fresh temporary session. There's no history here, right? My previous prompts aren't there. That's because I closed down the browser, didn't really mean to, and of course all my prompts go away because it's a temporary chat. You won't have that problem if you're just using a normal chat. But here's what I want you to do. We're going to be copying sections from 2 previous prompts anyway to get the formatting, and I'm going to use my prompt pack where I have all the prompts. You should have them if you scroll up in your session. Let's focus first on the actual macro itself, which is going to be new. I want an Excel VBA macro named add 6th generation. And then what do I want it to do? I want to format every cell in column P from row 1 to row 32 as follows. So just to remind you, every cell is going to have the name. So they all must have the same formatting right down to the last row, row 32. I'm going to scroll back up and I'm going to find my prompt that set the name boxes. And then I'm going to change the prompt a little. Here was the bullet points for the formatting. Set the font to band shrift condensed, stays. Set the font size to 12. stays. That is that green color. And now what changes is the border. So I add top border, left border, right border, and I deliberately didn't add a bottom border because the belonging date cell is below. But in this case, it's not. So I am going to include a bottom border. Then what else did I do? I entered the value, Valerie Postlethwaite. So I'll just take out that piece and say, yeah, that I still want that. What did I do last? Enter a space into the adjacent cell to the right. But I'm going to have the date in the adjacent cell to the right, so I definitely don't need that. But I'm not. If I swivel back to my example, we have a connector line going down in the middle of each pair of ancestors. It's the bottom border of the cell adjacent or to the left of the first row. Then I want the same to the left of the third row and the fifth row. So it's basically every second row I want this bottom border to the left. So I will phrase that as, if the row number is odd, add a bottom border to the adjacent cell to the left. So that's 1, 3, 5, and so on and so forth. So that is the names. I'm also going to put the date cell into the same macro, and we'll see how it does. Sometimes you put too much information to give too complex a macro. ChatGPT doesn't do great. But if it doesn't quite work out, we'll split this up into two different macros. Let's see how it does. So the date is in column Q all the way down. Format every cell in column Q from row 1 to row 32 as follows. And now I'm going to scroll back up to find my date instructions in the previous prompt to make the macro called format date boxes. Just going to copy its sections and then I'll edit it. This is just copying it down. I'll take this line out and I'll work my way down. So still want band shift light condensed, smaller font size, text alignment center, this gray. And once again, I'm going to change the border. So this has a bottom border, left border, right border. It's missing a top border. So I'll just give it a top border. I will just take that line out and say, yeah, enter the value 1901 to 1999 and then enter a space into the adjacent cell to the right. Yeah, I do want that. If you are putting geographical information, address details into that particular cell. That is it. I'll submit. Iterating through rows to 1 to 32. Where is it doing the border? It's doing the border here. It's calculating that if the row number is odd, 1, 3, 5, it's putting in a bottom border to the cell on the left. In O should be okay. And then we've got column Q, which is the dates. That looks about right. Looks okay. Let's give it a go. I'll copy this over to Excel, into the Developer tab, into Visual Basic, scroll down and find the end, cursor in, Control V, and now I've got myself a new macro called add sixth generation. Save, get out of here, and now I go to the macros button, and here I have this new macro. I hit run and see how it goes. That's done a good job. What isn't right here is the width. As you can see, I'm over the print area to the right. So what I need to do is to narrow things a bit. First of all, highlight all the name columns, column width, bring it down from 17 to 16. You'll get a little bit more truncation here, but it still fits quite a long name. You see the dotted line, still haven't pulled back enough space. So now I'm going to go to my connector columns, which I had at 3. And to give myself enough space, I'm going to have to bring them down to 1. And there we go. Bit of a squeeze, but it's there. You can see that the margin is just there on the right. So just to double check what it looks like, go to File, Print. Here we have 6 generations on a landscape page. The last macro that I'm going to give you is to set different colors for your male and female ancestors. Remember, we got ChatGPT to give us the list of all the calculated cells, with the exception of column P and column Q. So you can scroll up in your prompts and find that. I've got it separately in our prompt pack. We're going to copy it back into ChatGPT, and here is this final prompt. I want a VBA macro named set male female colors. So what is it going to do? Well, I'm going to set male to blue, female to light pink, and it just needs to iterate through and set alternating colors. The macro alternates between two background colors for a list of cells. Set odd position cells to this is the hex for light blue, and even position cells to this is the hex for light pink. Now, the cells are, and here is the list. This is for 5 generations. If you've gone ahead with the 6th generation, we want one more detail. Once above cells are completed, iterate through cells, it's column P, P1 to P32, setting each odd numbered cell to the blue and each even numbered cell to this color. Okay, so 2 different sets of instructions. Let's see how it does. Submit. I'm going to copy this back over to Excel, Developer tab, Visual Basic, down to the end, Control V, save that, get out of here, hit the macros. Where is it? It's this bottom one here. Set male, female colors, and hit run. And there we go. I forgot the first, that's B. I forgot to give it B16 in that list I gave. But maybe you want the home person to be a different color. A deliberate mistake on my part, but you can go and put it in yourself and you can experiment with your own colors. Finally, unless your name is Valerie Postlethwaite and your father is Valerie Postlethwaite and your mother is Valerie Postlethwaite, you probably don't want to leave the names in and those dates, right? You probably want a clean template. So the last thing we'll do is we'll tidy this up. I could do it in a macro, but because all the details are the same, we just use search and replace, right? So up here, replace, what do I want to replace? Valerie Postlethwaite. I want to replace that with just empty cell. Replace all. And then I want to replace this text here. Again, replace with nothing. There we go. There is our empty template for you to put in the details that you want. Well done for getting this far. It was quite a lengthy tutorial. If you're familiar with coding and you're thinking this would be a bit easier to do with Python instead of VBA, check out the link in the description to our online course on using Python with your own family tree. We show you how to convert your family tree into a database that you can analyze with Python notebooks. First couple of lessons are free, so you can try it out with no risk. Other than that, best of luck with your family research.